The silverware trembled in my hand, creating a soft, pathetic clinking sound against the fine china. It was the only noise in the room as my sister's words sliced through the Christmas dinner conversation like a scalpel. "The garage is ready for you, Samantha," my mother announced, not even looking up from her plate. She sliced her turkey with surgical precision. "Jessica's poodles get anxious in new spaces, so they need the guest room. We put a space heater out there for you. It should be fine." I froze. I looked at my father, waiting for him to intervene, to suggest that perhaps his 29-year-old daughter shouldn't be displaced by two standard poodles named Dolce and Gabbana. But he just poured more wine, his eyes fixed on the centerpiece. There was no negotiation. There was no debate. The hierarchy of his family had just been made explicitly clear in a single sentence. The dogs ranked higher than me. Before I tell you how I made them regret every single word, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I simply nodded, folded my napkin, and stood up. The walk from the back door of my parents' suburban house to the detached garage was only 50 feet, but that night, it felt like crossing a border between two different worlds. The Chicago winter air bit at my exposed skin, the wind chill dropping well below zero. Inside the garage, it wasn't much better. The air smelled of gasoline, old oil, and abandonment. They had set up a military-style cot in the corner, right next to a stack of boxes labeled Samantha's junk. I walked over and brushed a layer of dust off the top box. Inside, I saw my old high school debate trophies, tarnished and forgotten. Next to them was an oil pan that had been leaking for a decade. I sat on the edge of the cot, the metal springs groaning under my weight. Through the dusty window, I could see the warm glow of the dining room. I could see Jessica laughing, feeding a piece of prime rib to the white poodle sitting on my chair. For most people, this would be the breaking point. This would be the moment they stormed back inside, screaming about fairness and love. But I didn't feel rage. Not the hot, messy kind. What I felt was cold. I felt the kind of clarity you get when you finally balance a ledger that has been in the red for years. You see, they thought I was Samantha, the struggling freelance artist. They thought I scraped by on commission checks and gig work. They thought my silence over the last 5 years was the silence of shame, the quietness of a failure who knows her place. They had no idea that the art I was building was a global tech conglomerate called Ether. They didn't know that the commissions I worked on were billion-dollar acquisitions. They didn't know that I wasn't just solvent, I was the solvency. For 5 years, I had maintained this illusion. I drove a rented sedan. I wore simple clothes. I listened to their financial advice with a straight face. I did this because I needed to know something fundamental. I call it the dignity anchor. When you have money, real money, people change. They mirror you. They become who they think you want them to be. I needed to know who my family was when there was nothing to gain. I needed to know if their love was a natural resource or a subscription service that required a monthly fee. Tonight, looking at those dogs eating steak while I sat in a freezing garage, I had my answer. It wasn't a family. It was a transaction. And I had been the silent investor in a venture that had gone bankrupt years ago. I pulled out my phone. My screen was glowing with urgent messages from my board of directors. The acquisition of a mid-sized marketing firm was set to finalize in 48 hours. The company was called Sterling Media. My sister's company. I typed a single message to my chief legal officer. Prepare the final restructuring documents. I'm initiating the hostile clause. I lay back on the cot, pulling the thin, scratchy blanket up to my chin. The cold was seeping into my bones, but my mind was on fire with calculations. They wanted me to stay in the garage? Fine. I would stay in the garage. It builds character. And tomorrow, I would show them exactly what kind of character I had built. The next evening, Christmas Eve, the atmosphere in the main house had shifted from domestic toxicity to professional desperation. The house smelled of expensive roast beef and desperation. I walked in at 6 o'clock sharp, wearing the same simple sweater and jeans I always wore. Jessica was in the living room, wearing a dress that cost more than what she thought I made in a year. Standing next to her was a man I recognized instantly from the due diligence reports. Mr. Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Media. He was shorter than he looked in his press photos, and he smelled of expensive cologne and fear. He was holding a glass of scotch like it was a life preserver. "Oh, Samantha," Jessica said, her voice dripping with that special kind of pity she reserved just for me. "You remember Mr. Sterling? My boss." I extended my hand. "Mr. Sterling. A pleasure." He didn't even look at me. He handed me his empty glass without breaking eye contact with my father. "Be a dear and get me a refill, would you? And easy on the ice." I took the glass. I didn't throw it. I didn't crush it. I simply walked to the bar, refilled it, and handed it back. I was collecting data. Every insult, every dismissal was just another line item on the audit I was conducting in my head. Dinner was a masterclass in delusion. We sat around the table, the crystal chandeliers sparkling above us. The poodles were asleep on the expensive rug in the next room. "So, Jessica," my father boomed, beaming with pride, "tell us about this new campaign. I hear you're revolutionizing the industry." Jessica straightened up, preening. "It's incredible, Dad. We just launched the Q4 omnichannel strategy. We're projecting massive engagement. The market has never seen anything like it. We spent $8.5 million on the rollout, and the buzz is undeniable." I sliced my potatoes, keeping my eyes on my plate. $8.5 million. I knew that number. I knew it intimately. I had spent the last 3 nights reviewing the financials of Sterling Media. That $8.5 million hadn't generated massive engagement. It had generated a total return of $40,000. It was a catastrophic failure. It was the primary reason the company's stock had tanked 30% in 2 weeks, making them vulnerable to my takeover. But watching Jessica speak, I realized something profound. She wasn't lying. She wasn't trying to deceive us. She genuinely believed she was succeeding. It was the Dunning-Kruger effect in a designer dress. She was so incompetent that she lacked the cognitive ability to realize how incompetent she was. She mistook motion for progress and spending for strategy. She thought she was a captain steering a ship, but she was just a child burning money in a fireplace to keep warm. And Mr. Sterling? He just nodded along, tapping away nervously on his phone. He knew the ship was sinking. He knew the sharks were circling. He just didn't know the shark was sitting 3 feet away from him, eating mashed potatoes. "You know, Samantha," Jessica said, turning the spotlight on me. "Maybe you could learn something from Mr. Sterling. He's built an empire. It's a little more complex than whatever it is you do with your little drawings." I looked up. I met her eyes. "It's fascinating, Jessica. I'm actually very interested in the Q4 strategy. Specifically, the ROI on the digital spend. Did you manage to get the customer acquisition cost below $400? The table went silent. Jessica blinked. Mr. Sterling looked up from his phone for the first time, his eyes narrowing. That's internal data," Jessica stammered. "You wouldn't understand the nuance." "You're right," I said softly, taking a sip of my water. "I probably wouldn't." I went back to my meal. Let them have their appetizers. The main course was coming, and it was going to be very, very cold. The silence didn't last long. It was shattered by a vibration, so aggressive it rattled the silverware on the table. Mr. Sterling's phone lit up. Then it buzzed again, and again, a continuous, frantic spasm of notifications. He looked down at the screen, and the color drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. "My God," he whispered. He fumbled with the device, his fingers shaking. "It's the emergency alert system. It's a mandatory broadcast. All channels." Jessica lowered her fork, looking annoyed. "On Christmas Eve? Can it wait? I'm sure it's just another generic holiday greeting from HR." "No," Sterling snapped, his voice cracking. "It's not HR. It's her. It's the barbarian." I took a sip of my wine, hiding the small smile playing on my lips. The barbarian. That was the nickname the industry had given the CEO of Ether. They called her that because she was ruthless, faceless, and tore apart inefficient companies with the brutality of a conqueror. They imagined a monster, a tyrant sitting in a glass tower in Tokyo or London. They never imagined the barbarian was sitting 3 feet away, wearing a wool sweater from Target. "We have to watch this," Sterling said, standing up so abruptly his chair screeched against the floor. "She's calling a town hall. Right now. If this is a liquidation announcement, I need to know before the market opens on Tuesday." In the living room, my father commanded, sensing the urgency. Use the big screen. They scrambled out of the dining room like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Jessica, my parents, Mr. Sterling, all rushing to the 70-inch television mounted above the fireplace. I took my time. I finished my glass of water. I adjusted my watch. Then, I walked slowly into the living room, leaning against the doorframe. The massive screen was black, save for a single, pulsing logo in the center, Ether. Beneath it, the words, waiting for broadcast signal. The room was thick with tension. Mr. Sterling was pacing back and forth, wiping sweat from his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. If she liquidates the marketing division, we're done, he muttered to himself. I'm leveraged to the hilt. I can't lose this seat. Jessica tried to soothe him, though her voice wavered. She can't just liquidate us, David. We're the core asset. My campaign. She doesn't care about your campaign. Sterling hissed. She bought Richardson Global last month and fired the entire C-suite via a Zoom call. She's a butcher. I watched them panic. It was fascinating. It was like watching a nature documentary where the prey discusses the predator, completely unaware that the predator is holding the remote control. The logo on the screen pulsed faster. The countdown timer appeared, 59 seconds. Mr. Sterling stopped pacing. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. He adjusted his tie, as if the woman on the screen could see him through the pixels. Then, his eyes landed on me. I was still leaning against the doorframe, calm, unbothered. He looked at me, and his expression softened. But it wasn't kindness. It was that sickening, performative pity again. He walked over to me, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Samantha, he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. I fought the urge to recoil. Look, I know things are difficult for you right now. Living in the garage. The struggle. He glanced at the screen. 30 seconds. If we survive this, he continued, if the company is still standing in 5 minutes, I want to help you. We have an opening at the new headquarters. It's not glamorous. It's the night shift custodial crew. But it's steady money. You'd have benefits. And frankly, with your background, it's probably the best you can hope for. The room went quiet. My parents turned to look at me, their faces lighting up with relief. Oh, Mr. Sterling, my mother gushed, clasping her hands together. That is so incredibly generous of you. Did you hear that, Samantha? A real job with benefits. Say thank you, Samantha, my father added, his voice stern. Mr. Sterling is throwing you a lifeline. Don't let your pride get in the way. Beggars can't be choosers. I looked at Sterling. I looked at his hand on my shoulder. I looked at my parents, so eager to see me scrubbing floors just so they could feel like benevolent saviors. This was it. This was the fall summit, the absolute peak of their arrogance. They didn't just want me to fail. They wanted me to be grateful for the scraps of their mediocrity. They needed me to be the janitor so they could remain the executives of their own delusions. I felt a click in my chest. It was the sound of the final lock turning. The audit was complete. The balance sheet was finalized. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp thing. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice steady. I'll keep that offer in mind. It's very revealing. Good, Sterling said, patting my shoulder one last time before turning back to the TV. We just want to see you on your feet. The countdown hit 10 seconds. Here we go, Jessica whispered, clutching her pearls. God help us. Sit down, Samantha, my mother hissed. Show some respect. I didn't sit. Instead, I stepped forward, toward the dining table visible through the archway. My voice cut through the stiffness in the room. Actually, I said, I won't be accepting the cleaning job, Mr. Sterling. He didn't even turn to face me. Not now, Samantha. The broadcast is starting. I'm aware, I replied. That's why I'm standing. I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the Ether admin app, and hovered my thumb over the Geo Live button. You may want to look at the screen, Jessica, I said. I think you'll recognize the setting. Then I tapped. The 70-inch television flickered, flashed the Ether logo, and cut to a live feed. My face appeared, high definition, unmistakably me. The woman they just told to apply for janitorial work. And behind me was no sleek corporate studio. It was my parents' floral dining room wallpaper, framed like evidence. 2 seconds later, the broadcast echoed through the surround sound speakers. Good evening. Ether staff, shareholders, and global teams, I said, my voice doubling in real time, then through the speakers like a judgment pronounced twice. Jessica's wine glass slipped from her hand, exploding against the floor. No one looked down. Their eyes flicked between the living me and the giant, televised version. I am Samantha Wilson, I continued, founder and CEO of Ether. Mr. Sterling choked on air. Jessica froze, her face draining to porcelain. For the past month, Ether has conducted a silent audit of Sterling Media, I said, and instead of innovation, we found chaos and negligence. I turned slightly, angling the camera toward David Sterling, who stood behind me, sweating through his shirt. Say hello to the world, David. He recoiled as though the lens could burn him. Samantha, stop please. But I didn't. I outlined the losses, the failed campaigns, the leadership rot. Jessica trembled as I listed the numbers. 8.5 million gone under her direction alone. Effective immediately, I announced, Sterling Media's executive leadership is terminated for cause. Access revoked. Security is securing your servers as we speak. Right on cue, Jessica's phone lit up. Access denied. To the employees who actually keep this company running, I added, your jobs are secure. The restructuring begins now. I tapped the screen. Merry Christmas. The feed cut to black. For 10 seconds, the room was silent except for the fridge hum. My mother spoke first. You're the barbarian? I prefer architect, I said, pocketing my phone. But I'll answer to whatever's printed on the check. David Sterling collapsed into a chair. I offered you a cleaning job, he whispered, horrified. To the CEO of Ether. You did, I said. And it was the most honest thing you've done. It showed me exactly how you value people. I lifted the tall bottle of Don Julio 1942 from the table. My assistant sent a case of this to your office as a severance gift. I see you served it here instead. His eyes widened. You've been drinking your own severance package all evening, David. I turned toward the door. My father stood, trembling. Samantha, wait, we didn't know. If we had, that's the problem, I said quietly. You cared when I had nothing. Now you care because I have power. That isn't love. It's networking. Outside, my driver opened the SUV door. Good evening, Miss Wilson. Productive dinner. Extremely. As we pulled away, I glanced back at the house. 3 silhouettes watching, shrinking. What I didn't tell them was this. During the acquisition, I bought the distressed assets of Sterling's executives, including the mortgage note on my parents' house. I owned the roof they stood under. I wouldn't evict them. Not yet. Sometimes leverage doesn't need to be used. Sometimes its mere existence does the work. I raised a glass of sparkling water. To the garage, I whispered. It builds character.